I'm Dr. Peter McCullough here today at the McCullough Foundation with my partner, investigative reporter, journalist, and historian John Leake, and we have a breaking situation analysis on the attempted assassination of former President Donald Trump in Butler, Pennsylvania. And let me quickly set the context. Biden has had a disastrous early debate, and early debates are unconventional even before the respective Republican and Democratic national conventions, but a disastrous debate. We have reported that Biden's sum total of his medical and mental deterioration is at this point in time insurmountable. Democratic leaders agree. Many Democratic leaders are asking Trump to step down. It appears as if Trump has a clear pathway to the presidency. And John, now we're 2 days before the Republican National Convention, where Trump would be named the official nominee to run for president. And then look what happens in Butler, PA.
Yes, and so here we are in this sort of rural area. It's a kind of a showground, a kind of a fairground. And the first thing that jumped out at me, just evaluating the area, this building just to the north. It was apparently 121 meters to the north. So following very standard Secret Service protocols, you would look around in the days before the event, you would perform an evaluation of where a potential shooter could position himself, and that roof on that industrial building just to the north, the immediate place that the first thing you would do is secure the building.
Let me ask you, is it the prime spot for a shooter?
Absolutely.
Oh,
absolutely. I mean, and we'll have some aerial photographs of this showground, and you will see it's just right there, just to the north, clear line of sight. So, back in October of last year, Robert F. Kennedy Jr. was at a speaking event in Los Angeles, about 2.2 miles away from the hotel where his father was assassinated in 1968, when a man impersonating a federal agent approached the venue, showed his U.S. Marshal's badge, a fraudulent U.S. Marshal's badge, demanded on the authority of his badge to be taken to Mr. Kennedy. The private security that was there, that is run by a Mr. Gavin DeBecker and Associates, they quickly realized that something was amiss, and they refused to let him in, and he was neutralized. They didn't shoot him, they just held him. The police came, and a potentially fatal situation was neutralized. The irony there is the call has been, stop bleeding the Kennedy campaign of funds by requiring this immensely difficult, highly skilled, high logistics private security, assign him with U.S. Secret Service. This has been the convention for decades. But now I'm beginning to wonder if the fact that Gavin DeBecker and Associates were the security might well have been the thing to have saved Robert Kennedy's life. Because
John, let me ask you, for this, possible assassin, who is the first person to identify it? Was it a person in the lay public, or was it somebody from DeBecker's security team?
Well, he presented himself at the entrance and said, "Take me to Mr. Kennedy." It was Gavin DeBecker's security that said, "Okay, no, wait a minute. We need some further identification." And a lot of this is just procedure. I mean, you have the training and you have procedures and you're prepared. The thing that is notable about this is it's though there were no preparation.
Well, John, we're at about 24 hours into the incident, so we know a lot about the shooter. We know a lot about the circumstances, and we want to walk through this. But let me just ask you, is this the first assassination attempt on a president or former president in the era of cell phones and videos and layperson photography?
I believe that it is.
Well, boy, what a game changer that is. to get all of this footage and videos and quick photographs up and assembled, and actually on social media. I was watching two major mainstream media stations, CNN and Fox, and they were way behind social media, the tweets that were coming out by a variety of bystanders, Elon Musk and others. Well, go ahead and take us through this as the shooter starts to ascend the roof of this uncovered rooftop building.
Well, what I think is a kind of golden, witness is this man who gave an interview to a BBC, what appears to be a BBC reporter, shortly after the incident.
And watch and listen to the rally, right? We couldn't see him, but we could hear him. So we walked up, and probably 5 to 7 minutes of Trump speaking. I'm estimating here. I have no idea, but we noticed a guy crawling, bear crawling up the roof of the building beside us, 50 feet away from us. So we're standing there, we're pointing at the guy crawling up the roof.
And he had a gun, right?
He had a rifle.
A rifle.
We could clearly see him with a rifle. Absolutely. We're pointing at him. The police are down there running around on the ground. We're like, hey, man, there's a guy on the roof with a rifle. And the police were like, huh, what? Like they didn't know what was going on. We're like, hey, right here on the roof. We can see him from right here. We see him. He's crawling. And next thing you know, I'm thinking to myself, why is Trump still speaking? Why have they not pulled him off the stage? I'm standing there pointing at him for, 2-3 minutes. Secret Service is looking at us from the top of the barn. I'm pointing at that roof, just standing there like this. And next thing you know, 5 shots ring out.
So you're certain that the shots came from that guy on the roof?
100%. 100%.
And he was up there for a couple of minutes.
He was up there.
You saw him up there for a couple of minutes.
Absolutely. At least 3 to 4 minutes.
And you were telling the police and the Secret Service.
We were telling the police. We were pointing at him for the Secret Service, who were looking at us from the top of the barn. They were looking at us the whole time when we were standing by that tree.
Could they see
binoculars?
Could they see him?
Probably not, because the roof, the way the slope went, he was behind where they could see. But why is there not Secret Service on all of these roofs here? This is not a big place.
Did you see, obviously everyone, when the shooting started, everyone was very panicked. Did you see what happened to him at all?
Oh, yeah, they blew his head off.
Okay, sorry.
Secret Service blew his head off.
Okay, just be careful, because we don't quite know who's watching, but you're pretty sure they shot the guy?
Absolutely, 100%.
Okay.
Yep.
You saw that happen?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
And did you see them go up to him afterwards, or?
They crawled up on the roof. They had their guns pointed at him, make sure he was dead. He was dead, and that was it. It was over.
As Trump started, I noticed 2 officers that were looking for something or somebody. I was looking around myself and seeing a guy on top of one of the buildings go in between one building to the next, and went and told the officer that he was up there. And when I went back to my spot, I heard that people could still see the person from where they were standing. So I checked that out, and I went back to tell the officer that if he came over there, he could see them. And when I turned my back is when the shots started, and then it took me a second or two to figure out exactly what it was. And then it was just getting out of there and helping some other person out with her child, and we got out, and that was the end of that. And I went and left, and that was all.
So the viewers have some perspective. Behind us, okay, is the American Glass Research Company. Okay, can you kind of describe the building behind us, the tan building right there? Can you take a look at it? And then where was the shooter exactly?
There's more buildings behind the tan building that we can see. And we were back there, and there's 2 or 3 buildings behind that. And he was on both of them. I assume both of them when he went on that small section from one to the other. And that was where I last saw him, was the end of his day.
So this man was able to basically climb to the next building and you told law enforcement, hey, there's a guy over there.
Correct. I don't know how he got up there. I don't know any of that, but I definitely saw him up there and went to the officer, and that was all I know.
I wouldn't even be doing this. I'd be at some beautiful places towards the ocean, the Mediterranean.
Look, they're all pointing.
The Atlantic, maybe the Pacific.
Yeah, someone's on top of the roof. Look. There he is right there. Right there, see him? He's laying down. You see him?
Yeah, he's laying down.
And Scott, I'm here with you fighting like hell to get a senator.
What's happening?
And to make sure we take back the White House, because if we do, we're going to make America better than ever before. We're going to make it.
Yeah, look. There he is.
Easy, because we have millions and millions of people in our country that shouldn't be here. Dangerous people. Criminals. We have criminals. We have drug dealers. We have people that should not be here.
Right on the roof.
It's much tougher than it happens.
You went right on the roof.
Get over here!
I hope he's turning this way. Be careful, guys.
The redhead, if he's telling the truth, that he actually contacted the police officer and said that there is a would-be shooter working his way up on the roof, what's the immediate protocol by that police officer or law enforcement personnel?
Well, I wish I could say precisely. I'm not sure that the local guys there would have had the most Johnny on the spot training, but it would be something like on the radio, say, we appear to have a possible active shooter within range. So let law enforcement closer to the stage know what you've seen. They can then take action to secure the stage. And then as a law officer, engage the guy on the roof.
Well, are the local police officers, are they in coordination with the Secret Service in general?
Now, that much I can say for sure. My understanding is in the days prior to the event, the U.S. Secret Service detail sits down with the local law enforcement detail that is going to assist, and they come up with an action plan. They do a critical evaluation of the surrounding radius. They look at all of the buildings. My understanding now is that they have 3D line of sight analyses of all of the rooftops, any place where a shooter could get a shot, conceal himself. All of that should be analyzed, evaluated, and prepared for Secret Service working with local law enforcement.
Right, that's my understanding. And I've spoken on stage now 3 times before Trump. The last one was just a few months ago at the Libertarian National Convention. And that morning I went out for a jog and I came back and I happened to be talking with one of the local security force there in the building. And he was telling me, about the preparedness that they have for Trump coming in. And in that conversation, it implied that they are very well coordinated with the Secret Service. They know where he's going. They know every angle. They know where to look, where they set up the... Now, he didn't give me all the blow-by-blow details, but he didn't seem like, they were kept in the dark on anything, that they were coordinated. And that's my understanding, that there's always coordination. Even the state of Pennsylvania has active shooter protocols and active shooter training. It's on their website. And they say the very first step is, when there's an active shooter, is to notify. There is a notification of a potential active shooter situation, John. And it looks from that very first report, whether it was the redhead or there are some other laypersons who also saw him crawling up on the building, tried to flag for police to notify that. That doesn't happen, but it doesn't stop there. What are some of the next critical steps you analyzed?
Well, I mean, if you just start with an evaluation of the radius around the stage, where a highly controversial public figure is going to be speaking, that critical evaluation and risk assessment, you would have security on the roof of that building.
Wow.
I mean, we're not only talking about counter snipers on the barn behind Trump. You would have that building secured for sure. For sure. To me, that is the most conspicuous lapse of all, because it was just such a no-brainer. It's right there, clear line of sight to the stage. You would just secure the building.
You mean there would be somebody kind of on the security team up on the roof?
Absolutely.
Wow.
Absolutely. Well, because that's not only to secure that spot, but that's also a useful vantage point to see what's going on around the stage. So, I mean, I don't want to sound flippant, but based on my reading of the literature, and it's not as though this hasn't been thoroughly analyzed. I mean, you take John Hinckley's assassination attempt on Ronald Reagan in 1981. There has been so much research and technology brought to bear, well, starting with the Kennedy assassination in 1963, and then Hinckley on Reagan in 81. This has been studied ad nauseum for decades. And Gavin de Becker published this book in 2008, in which he does exhaustive analysis of how you evaluate an area around a public place where a figure is going, a public figure is going to appear. And the more controversial the figure, the more exhaustive the critical evaluation you do. So I think it's no exaggeration to state that this would be, from a paid professional standpoint, this is the Secret Service equivalent of a patient coming into your clinical practice complaining of severe chest pains, and you don't even bother to conduct basic diagnostic procedures. You just sort of glance at him and say, I think you'll be all right. I mean, negligence that raises the question of willful negligence.
Well, let's just kind of go through the steps, this kind of Swiss cheese model. So the first part is the police, from the redhead bystander who gives a very good BBC interview, they don't sound the alarm of active shooter because Trump is still talking and minutes are going by.
Well, I should say it starts with not securing the building.
Yeah. Okay, that's right. So don't secure the building. Then they see him crawling. Now the shooter, he's now known, so we might as well just bring this in. It's Thomas Matthew Crooks. He's a 20-year-old local Pennsylvania man. He's a young man. He's 20. So Crooks is a 20-year-old man. So he's crawling up. And then we have a situation where there's footage, and this is astounding, John. As Crooks is setting up, there are two counter snipers that actually have police on their uniforms with flak jackets. They're on the barn behind Trump. They're standing up with binoculars looking in the direction of Crooks.
They're scoping the roof, for sure. And those are powerful binoculars. They can certainly see the roof. I mean,
so they're watching, and the time on this is almost certainly in the time where Crooks is belly crawling with a rifle up the roof. The redhead has already seen him. Then the next thing we see is these two counter snipers have set up 3 tripods. There are 2 tripods with rifles, one high, one low. The guy in the foreground is high, the guy in the background is low. And then there's a third tripod that looks like it has a camera on it, John. How long would it take to set up those tripods? They don't have them set up originally. How long does it take to get them to set up?
I mean, 10, 15 seconds. I mean, you telescope out the legs, fix it. I mean, you could probably quickly bolt the rifle onto it, but I mean, several seconds.
Several seconds. And during that time, they clearly see him. They're concerned enough to set up the tripods. and there's still no call to the stage, to the Secret Service on the stage, to get Trump off the stage, to basically sound the alarm that there's an active shooter alert and get people's heads down.
It's astonishing. I mean, this is one of those things where, you know, and I've always been cautioned, you know, unless you're there actually watching, preferably from a bird's eye view, you know, certain camera angles, you're not necessarily seeing the whole picture as one would see it from a bird's eye. But based on all of the angles I've seen, the counter snipers are on the barn behind Trump. They're plainly visible. They're clearly looking in the direction of the industrial building to the north, where the sniper had managed to crawl up onto the roof with the rifle. I mean, you see the lapse of time, seconds. They're looking at the guy, then I mean, I don't see how else we can interpret this.
Well, there are these still frames, and then there's actually the video.
Right.
So the video then shows them, you can hear Trump basically talking. These guys are on the rifles, looking through the sights. The guy in the foreground is clearly on his sight. Trump is talking, and then we start to hear the report of what is almost certainly Crook's rifle. Is that your interpretation?
It is. I mean, the first time I looked at it, it was late last night and I was tired, but you see the sniper, the counter sniper, looking through his scope, and that's a very high-powered scope, so he would have clearly seen the roof at high magnification. It looks for a moment that he then glances up from the scope to just eyeball it with both eyes, and then he suddenly drops back on the scope like he's maybe prepared to engage, and then you hear several shots ring out, and those shots, the auditory signal sounds like those shots were all coming from the shooter, from the would-be assassin 120 meters away. So this guy, and then the other notable thing, and this guy's supposed to be a professional, he flinches, which I thought was remarkable.
And you know, that's a little bit old, that shot. That shot's a couple of months old, and if you want to really see something that's said, take a look at what happened.
But John, I wonder what circumstances would a counter sniper be totally ready, have somebody in their sights, look up and double check, and then let the sniper, let Crooks fire maybe 6 shots at the target, former President Trump. Well, how can that possibly be protocol?
I don't see how it can be. I mean, the whole point of being a counter sniper is to engage someone who's climbing up on a roof with a rifle to shoot a campaigning president. I mean, that's your job, is to neutralize that kind of threat. So I can't imagine. I mean, I suppose you could say that he's inexperienced. He'd never fired a shot at a human being. Maybe he'd just been at the rifle range. I don't know. But at the very minimum, it looks like, you know, the C team. It's not the A team.
Well, John, would there ever be a command of, let's say they're talking to some central commander. Well, I see somebody on the roof 150 yards away. He's on this building. He's crawling up. He's getting, you know, these guys are, you know, they've got earbuds in. They've got microphones. You know, one doesn't set up 3 tripods, load a rifle, watch somebody on another building, and they don't say anything. You know, he's actually with somebody. There's 2 people on the roof, so it's not a single counter sniper. They must have been communicating with the central command. Is there any way a central commander would say, listen, you can't fire first. Let's see if this guy fires some shots. Is there any way that command would go out?
I mean, the only thing I can think of, and of course that those men, those counter snipers on the roof are going to have to be subjected to a rigorous interview. But the only thing I could think of is that someone is telling him it's imminent that law enforcement is about to get onto the roof. I mean, maybe he was led to believe that the guy was the apparent would-be assassin was in a millisecond going to be engaged by other law enforcement. I mean, I'm at a loss.
But John, think about this though. So Crooks takes probably at least 6 shots at Trump. Sadly, it hits another man actually in the head, and demonstrating how a single shot of this caliber bullet, and I think, as I recall, you nailed exactly the gun type and the bullet, kills a man instantly. There's an ER doctor, a very experienced, credible ER doctor, who's called over and looked at this guy, saw brain matter, did CPR. So there's a bystander that is killed. We're told maybe 2 other people critically wounded.
What did you see, sir?
I heard the shots. I thought it was firecrackers to begin with. Somebody over there was screaming, he's been shot, he's been shot. So I made my way over. I said, I'm an emergency department physician. Let me help you. The guy had spun around, was jammed between the benches. He had a headshot here. There was lots of blood, and he had brain matter there. And so I got him. There's a helicopter coming in to get him. So I got people there really helpful. I got him up on the bench.
Shot that you saw?
Then I did CPR, did chest compressions as well as I breathed for him.
One person.
I was the only one that did it.
We need to evacuate everybody.
As I watched the podium, I thought I saw more shots hit the podium. I would not be surprised if they find some bullets in the podium. Trump, fortunately, is down. Secret Service get him down. But there's a video, John, of bystanders, who are actually have their cameras on the roof of where Crooks is. And they clearly have video that Crooks is down on the roof, and there's no imminent law enforcement people up there. I mean, it's actually probably some period of time where there's a guy who's got full gear and camos on, and he goes up there to kind of look down on Crooks's dead body. So it's not like law enforcement was imminent. If they were said, stand down, they're going to tackle Crooks from behind. No, that was not anywhere close, because people had a video where Crooks's body up there, there are no law enforcement people up on the roof for that period of time.
Sure.
So,
what I'm suggesting is a wild hypothetical.
Right.
Is that the counter sniper was being deceived?
Right. So if they were said, no, stand down, we're about ready to get him from behind, that never happened because people were on that. So then we have the next part of this where the counter sniper takes a shot. As I remember, I think it's 2 shots, but it may have just been 1, but it's a headshot. Now, in Crooks' shot in the head, you can actually clearly see his body. Is that common to kind of have that level of precision for a counter sniper?
Well, yes. I mean, a properly sighted rifle, particularly on a tripod with a telescopic sight with a capable shooter, yes, the shot could be placed directly between his eyeballs without any difficulty at all. I mean, it's very, very precision weaponry. So the headshot would be, we have to make absolutely sure that he's neutralized. Like, we're not taking any chances with this guy. You need to neutralize him in a head. And the head, remember, if he's in a prone position on the roof, the head is what's going to be, in your crosshairs.
Right, but think about Crooks now. He's up, he's reportedly in a prone position. He's taken 6 shots. Now, if he thinks he's secure, he's going to stay in place and see what happens. If he thinks he's not secure, he's going to quickly roll out of the field of view.
Well, unless he went into it as a suicide shooter. I mean,
if that's the case, a lot of times they just say, stand up and, go ahead and take me. My read of this is that Crooks went up with the idea that he's over there, no one's going to see him. He's going to take some shots, and that he's secure from receiving any counter sniper shots.
Well, I mean, we don't know his frame of mind.
Right.
He was a young man. His frame of mind is probably something that would be difficult for us to deduce. And the fact that he's dead means that he can't be interviewed. But I mean, even the most foolhardy youngster would have to recognize, without any kind of silencing equipment on the rifle, your position is going to be pretty quickly given away by the sound of the rifle. People will turn in your direction, and it's the only building.
Well, John, let me ask you as a forensic expert, I know nothing, actually. I've never shot a gun before, but tell me, do professional assassins, is it like in the movies, do they use silencers?
Well, if he is trying to do this to remain undetected as best as he can, with the greatest probability of being able to roll off the roof and slip into the crowd, then he might use a silencing device on the rifle. This guy, I mean, you can hear the shots from 120 yards away with probably not high quality audio sensors on cell phones. So he would have, provided he was reasonably intelligent, he would have had to have deduced that the sound of the shots would draw attention to my position on the roof.
Okay, so that this was almost certainly going to be a suicide type situation. He's not.
Remember, from his vantage point, he clearly sees the counter snipers. He knows they're there.
He has to. He has to see them, right?
Yeah.
Now,
Correct.
the question is, do you think he took any shots at the counter sniper? Do you think that's the reason why the counter sniper flinched?
The number of shots fired, I would have expected more injuries in the crowd just behind Trump. I was a little bit surprised by that. It did make me wonder if there were shots going high.
Well, the counter sniper who flinches, could that be taking a bullet in the flak jacket? Or if you take a bullet in the flak jacket, do you actually get enough of an impact where you fall back?
And that's a little bit old, that shot. That shot's a couple of months old. And if you want to really see something that's said, take a look at what happened.
Very high energy bullet. It's going. My understanding is it was an AR-15 style weapon. If it had the more robust chamber on it, it would be a NATO 5.56 cartridge. I think 50,000 psi in the firing chamber, producing a velocity of about 3,250 feet per second. So even if that bullet struck you on a flak jacket, it would be immensely violent. It might even penetrate the flak jacket. So,
but John, if you were up there and let's say Crooks did take a shot at the counter snipers and he missed, but a bullet went whizzing by, would that be enough to make that guy?
Oh yeah. Yeah, I mean, that's certainly possible. It's like it's very alarming.
So he may have flinched like that. Okay, so then the counter snipers get a headshot and he goes down. It's pretty visible, actually. Everybody can see this. So the shooter is down with the headshot. Trump is down beneath the podium, and we're told, I guess, his shoe got scoffed off by in the scuffle, and they're trying to keep him down. Trump they kind of assess, did he take a fatal headshot? I mean, as a doctor, I can tell you, I think it was millimeters away from basically just a fatal headshot for Trump. He's bleeding from the external pinna, that's the outside of the ear, and he must touch it with his hand. And of course, the blood goes across his face in these streaks, which confirms that the shot came from behind his kind of left going to right from behind.
No,
and it's interesting that do I have that wrong?
He turned to his right. He was facing the barn when that shot struck his ear. That streaking
you got it. Yeah,
on his face is not spatter. That's where he touched himself.
Oh, he touched himself.
Or
Okay,
brushed his ear or something like that.
But here's the interesting thing, is that Trump was using some graphics. He had some big screens on either side. And he had actually turned to look to a graphic. He had turned his head. And what I had thought is, I think Crooks probably had his head completely in the crosshairs. And at that precise time, Trump turns his head to look at the screen. And that's the reason why the bullet misses the direct back of his head and hits the ear.
It's possible he had no military training. He'd never fired at a human being in his life. You know, he's 20. So just doing the math on Iraq and Afghanistan, let's just say he has no military background. So you're going to be very nervous. You're going to have your breathing, your heart rate, everything is going to be just a mess. And he probably wasn't a very good marksman. That wasn't a difficult shot to make, by the way.
I know, but if one turns his head, couldn't it be just enough to have it be out of the sight? He has everything sighted up. He's in the crosshairs, and then you turn your head. At any rate, Trump is down. It's a glancing blow. Trump asks, listen, let me get my shoe on. And then he gets up. And it's interesting. The Secret Service is trying to, I guess, physically cover him. But he's a tall man. He's a big man. And then he says, wait. And he kind of thrusts his arm and his fist out and his face between the arms of the Secret Service. And then he looks like he's saying, fight, fight, fight. And at that moment, what's going on with the Secret Service? By that time, do the snipers tell the guys down below, we got a guy on the roof? Or do they think there's multiple snipers? What's going on with the Secret Service communication?
Very good question. Those guys are going to have to be interviewed, you know, on a kind of a second by second. I mean, the proper way to do it would be to watch the tape with them, to sync all of that up and do a critical analysis. I mean, all of the questions that you're asking, you know, must urgently be asked and analyzed, and it wouldn't be hard to do. The question is, and I know this is where the mind of the country is now, can we trust the Secret Service to do this?
Well, you know, they usher him off. You know, he does go off. They don't run. They kind of in this crowd. They usher him off. You know, I don't see a ton of people trying to flag people down and kind of tell them to get down. And I certainly don't see anybody rushing to the other injured. I keep looking on tape, like, where is the man who took the fatal shot to the brain? Where's the other two people? Now, the ER doctor says that he was kind of scrunched between the chairs. And I can tell you, I have been a first responder when people go down in between chairs with a cardiac arrest. And sometimes it's hard to, you know, get the body out and start to figure out what's going on. But they get Trump to the Suburban. And they're trying to scrunch him in the back. And then he thrusts out his fist another time. And so what we end up with is with some pictures. There's one of somebody who must have been just beneath the stage. And Trump is up there. There's the podium, the Secret Service. And the Secret Service have their head down, particularly the one from behind. And Trump is looking out defiantly with his fist up. And then there's another one where he's getting in the Suburban and the same thing. What's your read on that? I mean, in terms of Trump's level of courage, is that, you know, is there any type of historical, you know, precedent for that?
The first thing you would start with, you know, what was Trump's mental state when he realized he was being shot at? He's down on the ground. You know, he probably realizes it is just a grazing wound. There would have been a recognition at that point, okay, I appear not to be mortally wounded, but there would have been so much adrenaline. I mean, I cannot imagine. I mean, it must be like entering a boxing ring times 10. You've just been shot at. Mm-hmm. Trump obviously is a neurologically atypical man. There are a lot of kind of high energy, bombastic elements to his general makeup. Who knows what he was thinking? But I would think adrenaline and anger and defiance are perhaps not to be unexpected. The most remarkable example we have in history of a presidential candidate on campaign who just demonstrated perfect mental composure was Teddy Roosevelt. I believe it was 1912. He was campaigning as an independent in his so-called Bull Moose Party. when he was actually shot as he approached the podium, he's not a medical doctor, but he somehow ascertained or purportedly ascertained it wasn't mortal. Maybe he could see that it just grazed his ribs or something, and gave the speech, which, was quite something. He starts by saying, I think if everyone would please be as quiet as possible, you may not be aware that I have been shot, but it's going to take a lot more than one shot to kill a bull moose. So it was almost unbelievable in its kind of sang-froid and his mental composure.
His shirt has been preserved, that white shirt. He was shot up in the right pectoral area, and that's where the apex of the lung comes up, and it must have just been outside the lung, but in this very vulnerable triangle, there's blood vessels, the brachiocephalic, and then the right subclavian artery and vein, the brachioplexus. I mean, there's a lot of anatomy right here. And I can tell you, that's never a place where you wouldn't have incredible pain. By looking where that blood stain evolved, that had to be incredibly painful. And what an astonishing parallel here. Teddy Roosevelt and now Donald Trump. And was Roosevelt at the time, was he actually on a campaign to get back in office, just like Trump?
I believe he was, but campaigning is an independent.
This is astonishing. So Roosevelt had already been president.
Correct.
Just like Trump, and now he is running again. He's been out of office, and he's running again. This is astonishing, the parallel there. And then Trump gets off. He goes to a local center, and then quickly people get their messaging out. So to summarize, if one was to look at this in this Swiss cheese model, there appeared to be no attention in the pre-planning for this obvious roof setup. No U.S. or law enforcement officer on the roof. Police are notified that Crooks is belly crawling up with a rifle. Again, no active shooter alert goes out from the police. The counter snipers are up there. They scope him out with binoculars. Still no active shooter notification. They set up their tripods and their rifles. Still no active shooter notification. They essentially allow him to take shots on President Trump, sadly kill one of the attendees, injure several more. They allow that to happen before they respond with a kill shot. And then we see the sequence. Now, John, I wanted to ask you, when Trump holds his fist out in a defiant moment, many in the crowd cheer. I don't know if you saw this, but they weren't huddling in fear. The crowd itself seemed to be ignited by that show of defiance. The crowd themselves, the people in the crowd, appeared to become fearless. Did you get that?
So we gotta move to the bus. Let me get my shoe. Okay, my shoe down. Watch out. Wait.
I think it would be interesting to analyze. So you hear the initial burst of gunfire.
Take a look at what happened.
One of the bullets hits Trump in the ear, or the right ear. You have a whole bunch of people that hit the deck. It would be interesting to see, how many seconds then elapsed of people down on the deck without subsequent gunfire. Now, remember, if you're in a crowd and you hear pop, 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 I mean, we know from the JFK assassination in Dallas, and by the way, I was just down at the Sixth Floor Museum right before this interview, just kind of looking at that, refreshing my memory on that. You know, there's a lot of ambient noise from cheering and all of that, so people don't necessarily know what's going on.
Well, I think a big mistake, and I've been guilty of this too, John, is when you hear pop, when you're at a big event like this and you hear pop, 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 don't think it's firecrackers or fireworks.
Right.
That's a huge mistake. It's a natural, because, you know, we just had 4th of July and we hear pops periodically. Think it's gunfire. It's very important. You got to train your mind to think that it's gunfire. But you know what? We did not see a mass stampede of people. Do you remember at the Jason Aldean concert when there was a sniper up in the MGM Grand and he started shooting at the crowd? There was an incredible stampede of people.
Yeah, but he didn't stop. There was no abatement of gunfire.
Right. Here, the gunfire stopped. Yeah. And I wonder if there was any notification that, listen, you know, a shooter down, or if anybody heard this. I didn't hear any layperson's report of this, but the crowd was amazingly calm, is what I'm saying, for the situation. And then they seemed to rise up with as Trump, defiantly holds up his bloody fist.
Well, one logical deduction is that he hits the deck. I've seen a photograph and profile. He's sort of on the ground. He has what appears to be Secret Service kind of huddled around him. And it almost looks like he's kind of got his hand on his head on his hands. You see the blood coming down from the right ear. Now, it could be that the Secret Service in communication, with radio communication with earbuds, were told, shooter neutralized, you're free to get up and move him.
Oh, okay.
So because if there was any risk, if there was any perception that this guy's going to continue blasting away, you wouldn't get up. Well, they wouldn't hoist him to get out of there.
Right, you wouldn't hoist him up. And on top of that, there's some military guy who gets on the front of the stage, kind of a tall, lanky guy, and he's in full battle, and he's got a gun out and everything, and he's kind of looking out of the crowd. Now, he's not looking towards where the shooter is, but he's looking out over the crowd, I guess, to see if there's going to be any more, any more nefarious activity from the crowd. But the point is, and I think that's what I tried to understand from you, is at that point in time, they must have said the shooter is neutralized. They must have thought they got the threat and it was okay to move him. Well, if the communications were that good, why didn't they tell everybody to get down in those minutes when they clearly saw this thing evolving?
Yeah, so I think it would be useful, sometimes for analysts like you at the McCullough Foundation, and I'm always trying to assist you, the really useful public service, it doesn't lie in making the deductions, it lies in framing the good questions that our American people need to be asking, our media needs to be asking. Now, our expectation of our mainstream media performing, good interrogations of those in power, I think we've kind of lost our faith in that. I mean, we saw, you referenced it, independent media, social media was so far ahead of CNN and the other legacy media. I mean, it's almost like they're not even in the game anymore.
Well, John, let me ask you, I mean, Elon Musk was not bashful about this. He's out there, has more Twitter followers than anyone. He immediately said two things. One, he fully supports Donald Trump for president. Number two, he said the Secret Service all need to be fired, and he immediately pointed the finger at the Secret Service. Now, I was listening to Fox and CNN, and they were giving all kinds of laudits to Secret Service, that they save lives, and even former President Clinton, Bush, and Obama all praised the Secret Service. At Fox and CNN were praising Secret Service.
we need to make a distinction between the men who are standing on stage and whoever the principal decision makers are, who are supposed to be doing the bird's eye analysis, the pre-preparation, the identifying, you know, of possible sniper positions and all of this pre evaluation that we talked about at the beginning of our conversation. It was the guys in the Secret Service who were supposed to be doing that critical scrutiny should be directed. The men and women on the stage, I think it's a very reasonable deduction that they were on stage. Their job is to protect the protectee in the event that shots ring out, and it looks like they got around him and did their job. It's who is the brain that is supposed to be doing the analytical work. That's where the scrutiny needs to go. Now, it would be interesting, and I'm going to continue following this, is it a reasonable assumption that radio communications were recorded? And if they were,
okay,
at least a transcript should be released to the American people. I don't see why that should remain a secret. I mean, on what grounds could you say, you could say, well, we don't want to release trade secrets. I could see the Secret Service doing that, to which I reply, well, what trade secrets?
Well, I mean, John, you know, Speaker of the House, Mike Johnson, you know, literally within hours, immediately called for an investigation of what happened there with the Secret Service. Do you think that's justified?
Absolutely. And it's not some Mickey Mouse, you know, Warren Commission where we just have to completely trust the authorities and whatever. There needs to be major transparency in this. And I would think the proper thing to do is for Congress to appoint a special commission that is not free of partisan political. I don't even know how you would do that at this point. How could you make it more unbiased than the Warren Commission? I don't know. That's a procedural question. But the point is this. This should be rigorously investigated, obviously, with maximum transparency. Radio transcripts of communications. The counter snipers need to be thoroughly interviewed. I think that their interviews should be released, at least transcripts should be released to the public. This should be fully transparent. And I'll tell you why. It's not just to indulge the curiosity of the people. This is a slightly nuanced point. If you don't provide proper security protection to the opposing candidate on the campaign trail, whether it be Robert F. Kennedy Jr. or Donald Trump, you've basically abandoned a lawful republic. Now it's just mafia rule. Your candidates can be subjected. Go ahead.
Well, I'm glad you mentioned it because Robert F. Kennedy, I'm told, has been denied Secret Service protection. And, you know, I spoke at a major event. I was the keynote speaker, and Kennedy was positioned as a surprise speaker. One of the security measures they took is not to pre-announce that he was there. And when he showed up, he followed me directly on stage, and then we both appeared on stage. And I can tell you, security was light. I mean, I had two people assigned to me. I could easily slip away to the restroom by myself, although they were, you know, trying to tail me. And then when I was on stage with Kennedy, you know, we were wide open. That would be a wide open shot for anyone. We also have Chase Daniels, who's the nominee from the Libertarian Party. But perhaps this should be a complete review of what type of security measures are in place for major candidates. And, you know, we're talking about presidential candidates here, but there are certainly others that are influential. John, we're going to have to bring this to a close, but I do want to ask you, from your vantage point as an investigative journalist, but also a historian, what are the implications, do you think, of this event as we're talking about history unfolding right in front of us, particularly presidential history?
Well, the question that arises for me, and it's a huge question, I don't presume to be able to answer it, but it seems to me that one could logically deduce, had Trump been hit, a fatal headshot, which to me is a miracle that he wasn't. I mean, it was an easy shot. Had he been hit, it would have become apparent to all of his supporters, and they number about, at least half the country. And a lot of them are armed pursuant to the Second Amendment. It almost seems like you're flirting with civil war at that point.
Wow.
The perception that this was deliberate, you didn't protect our candidate. There has been something like a silent coup d'etat in this country. Constitutional protections of the opposing presidential candidate for our elections have been impaired deliberately so that he will be shot. So at that point, the political implications are of a divisiveness that could quite easily erupt into something like an insurrection. Now, which raises the question, and again, I don't know, I am speculating, but whoever's running this country, and I think you would share my perception that President Biden does not possess full cognitive powers for an executive, full awareness of what's going on. Whoever's actually running this country, could it be that they're acting in such bad faith that it was a deliberate provocation of civil insurrection in order to have grounds for declaring martial law?
But John,
this happened in history.
Let's play this out. So if Trump would have been assassinated, it could have sparked potentially a civil war of some sort, or at least people taking up arms against one another. But he survives. He is courageous and defiant. Can that actually unify the country in solidarity against what can only be described as apparent evil?
I think that there is a margin of people who probably straddle a kind of no man's land between passionate supporters of Donald Trump and passionate detractors. There's probably some stratum of the electorate who's not really sure. Maybe they think he's kind of bombastic or foolish or whatever, but that image of him being brave and defiant in the face of gunfire could sway their sympathy. Now, remember though, it's not only the image of a demonstration of old-fashioned stoical courage on his part, it's the perception that the ruling party would be pleased for him to be killed. And that's the amazing thing. I mean, the Democrat establishment that took power under Lyndon Johnson when he took the oath immediately following John Kennedy's assassination. I mean, Lyndon Johnson was a pretty wild and crazy man, but he still had that gravitas and that solemnness to immediately, recognize this is a disaster for the Republic. He privately may have rejoiced that he was now going to become the chief executive, but he at least pretended to be deeply distressed and moved by this. Johnson also made a very solemn, he was very quick. He got up in the middle of the night in Washington, D.C., and made a very heartfelt statement when Robert Kennedy was shot in Los Angeles. I didn't see the Biden administration or its passionate supporters expressing any real concern. The news media seemed to try and downplay this as though it were, maybe Trump fell down. It wasn't even characterized as an assassination attempt.
Yeah, it wasn't initially, and Biden certainly was slow to get out an official statement. But John, you posted something, and then people have backed this up, that since the debate, Biden has uttered the words that Trump has a bullseye on him. I mean, how do you factor that into the public's perception of what's happened?
I mean, given President Biden's cognitive decline or impairment, the question is that just a kind of deranged thing for a man to say that is no longer fully in possession of his higher cognitive faculties? I don't know. It's a strange metaphor to use, though. It's like enough talk of the debate, let's put the bullseye on this guy. I mean, I could see let's redouble our efforts at civil discourse or beating him in the next debate.
But John, in terms of a storyline, it couldn't look worse for Biden. So he's readily beaten in the debate. He has many people around him calling him to step down. He then, says that Trump has a target on a bullseye on his back. And then there's an assassination attempt on Trump just 2 days before the Republican National Convention. How do you think historians, 10 or 20 or 50 years in the future, how are they going to look at this event?
It all depends on the quality of what is revealed by the investigation.
Okay.
I mean, it's all going to depend on the picture that emerges. I mean, but human beings have moments where they do regress into very, very atavistic feelings. I mean, the old aggressive predatory primate, comes to the fore. I mean, I've seen reports on multiple, even public officials making flippant remarks like, wish the shooter had taken shooting lessons.
Don't miss Trump next time. Thank you.
I mean, that there have been full expressions of a truly atavistic hatred that misses the point. I mean, it doesn't matter if you have a visceral dislike of a candidate. The whole point of a constitutional republic is that, first of all, that no particular executive can go beyond the law. And if you want to have a republic based on an electoral process where the people are represented, you can't have mafia boss elimination of the president, the opposing candidate. I mean, everybody remembers that film, The Godfather, where the corrupt police captain, of New York City pulls the security from the hospital where Vito Corleone is an intensive care. This is just a mafia. If our grave concern bordering on extreme suspicion comes to fruition in the investigation, that security was simply pulled from this, or it was never implemented in the first place, we're looking at a mafia style approach.
Or if there was, in a sense, a setup, what if Crooks was somehow set up by various operatives and they left that roof open for him? He was told he could be a hero if he took out Trump. He gets up there. The plan is to let him take some shots at Trump, and then the counter snipers take him out so he can't witness all these interactions with. We're going to have to let our listeners and viewers out there decide. Again, I think the investigation will be big. I do think this is an inflection point in American history. I just feel it in my bones. I do feel like the sentiment of the country may be changing. Is certainly with respect to the realization that we're facing not just one crackpot, mentally ill person out there, John, that we're facing really a force of evil with many, many behind it. We're going to have to leave it here for the McCullough Foundation. We're going to try to get this out very quickly. John, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Doctor. Thanks for the conversation. It's certainly of critical importance. Thank you.